25 days. He could live 25 days, and if there was another poison attack, all charges against Dew would be dropped. The prisoner didn't know whether or not to be relieved at that perspective. At least he received a little food and something one could potentially call a blanket, which he could cover himself with to not fully freeze to death. But there was nothing he could do but wait. And he did. He waited through the first day. Nobody went to look for him, not Josephine, who was probably still lying in bed trying to get rid of the sickness. He wondered if she even knew what was going on with him. Tiana also didn't visit. Maybe she found the guards too scary to ask. Or she didn't care enough. That was probably it. Frederick and Sean didn't visit, but why would they? Dew felt as if he was a burden to Fred whenever they spent time together, and when it came to the latter, Dew felt as if he barely knew the man outside of the job. There was also the chance that all of them thought him to be dead already. It could be that the verdict was never published because it was an embarrassment for everyone involved. Everyone with at least a little bit of common sense would have noticed the ton of flaws it brought, but Avery was right. Barely anyone here had the ability to draw out simple conclusions outside of their daily routine. The hybrid wouldn't return before the deadline was up, and he was to die for sure. The actual culprit would probably wait longer now that 2 of their attempts had failed already. And he would be hanged on a public gibbet, so the verdict said. Then his body would rot on a rope for everyone to see. Avery would come back home through the city gates and see his fresh corpse. If he was burned immediately, all his roommate could potentially find was an empty room. Then he would ask what had happened, and someone would tell him Dew had tried to kill the king, and Avery wouldn't believe it. And then he would kill himself. Or not. Maybe that Merlin wasn't important enough to deserve an action that drastic, but maybe he was. The only joy Dew felt was looking outside the small window and seeing the little bit of new greenery and the sun on its highest point when it was a good day and Dew didn't sleep through that magical time to be unavoidably awake at night. The time didn't make much of a difference, he quickly noticed, only the temperature did. The stench in the prison was always bad. The stone was almost always cold and always the opposite of comforting. Dew wished for the blue cape and touched the part of his shirt where the knot holding the cape together would usually be. To his surprise, he felt something similar. It was a necklace with the crystal. The crystal wasn't pink anymore, but a dull grey. That always happened after at least 2 days of being alone. Dew guessed it to be related to Avery's absence, because it would flare up again once he was in reach again. He cupped the crystal. The back of his mind thought of throwing it out of the window to get rid of the constant reminder that no one was there who would even try to save him from his miserable situation. His common sense held onto it, though. Perhaps a miracle could happen. Maybe the goddess could be real for this specific situation. Soon it happened that he lost track of time. He guessed it to be half-time or later. His limbs went sore from the hard environment and lack of movement, as well as the curled-up position he spent most of his days in. Slowly the fear of death transformed into anger. How could the ruler of a whole kingdom be so stupid? He began to understand Frederick more. If the poison would have gotten to the king first, would Alba be queen, and would that be better? For sure, he already thought. Her mercy in contrast to the only mildly effective strategy of fear the past kings followed might make for a good contrast. Yet he still didn't wish the king to die. He didn't want anyone to die if possible, especially not without proper reason, obviously including himself. The sun came out and the cell got slightly warmer. He sat before the iron bars but looked outside the window to watch the pretty clouds be pushed by the wind that raged up there, but only a warm breeze could be felt down on earth. The birds sang in the morning. March was approaching its height. He thought about asking the guard for the date, but didn't because he didn't want to know. The fluffy clouds were quite pretty. His shortage of time wasn't. Dew fell asleep midday. If his execution was today in the afternoon as usual, he wouldn't notice unless the door swung open and hit him in the head. But that wasn't what woke him up in the afternoon. Instead, it was the noise of steps. Of course, the guard constantly walked up and down, and the clattering of his armored boots had become familiar to him. Yet those were footsteps of actual shoes, and there was only one set instead of multiple when either another poison was brought in or servants were sent to clean up a cell. Was it his time already? Would someone come to clean his space even before he got out, or was someone else let go recently, giving away new space within the basement? The guard, who stood on the end of the corridor opposite to the exit, rushed towards the new visitor, and soon Dew could hear the man's voice. "Horse have no permission to enter unless you want to turn yourself in." Another person spat. "Move." Then he stood before Dew. His black hair with the grey streaks was a mess, his blue work clothes a little ripped and torn, and face filled with compressed distress. Dew stood up, almost falling over due to his now weak legs. "Welcome back," he greeted, choking on his own words. "Thank the stars you're alive," Avery exclaimed, and reached through the bars to hold his face briefly before continuing. "That city guard's wife told me you were accused of murder, but she didn't know what happened to you. What was the verdict?" Dew could imagine Avery stopping the woman in the middle of the corridor in this condition, and her being anxious from the fact that another one of her team was about to die. She probably had half a heart attack. "What day is it?" Dew asked first. Avery's face sank as he realized the rough content of Dew's fate. "May 23rd, he replied. The prisoner stared at the floor and revealed, "Then I'll hang in exactly 1 day. Dew took a step back in fear as Avery's fist landed on the iron bar dangerously close to his face and slurred. His horns then leaned against it while he had his eyes pinched close. Who spoke the verdict?" "The king," Dew replied, and watched as the other one's knuckles became white as they clenched around the bars. "I can do this," Avery then huffed, more to himself than to Dew. "I can do this, and if I don't, free yourself and run." He reached out for the prisoner's hand and pressed it tightly. "Can you not let me reappear somewhere else?" Dew spoke up with hope. "And make you a criminal wanted all across Bota? You'd be dead in less than a month, alone and with your recognizable features. Listen, I will do everything I can. If I can't get you spoken free in time, I will try to come and get you somehow, but I can't promise anything. I have to leave now." Then Dew watched as the tip of the dark cape vanished from his vision as Avery stormed outside. He looked at his hand. There was the knife in the leather sheathings. Avery didn't come back for the rest of the day. A new guard arrived and looked at the one laying knocked out on the ground and asked what happened to him. Dew replied, "He got the authorities a little wrong," and the guard nodded, but there was not a single thought behind those eyes. They started small talk during the time the one on the floor took to wake up, and more. As he did, he got up and, while leaving, recited more words for prostitute than Dew had ever heard before, which left him a little bit surprised. Usually other knights and servants referred to Avery as faggot due to the pre-existing rumors or casual nicknames. The new guard was around 25 years old and had been in service for 7 years. He was from a different unit than the Dragon Hybrid, under a minor general who wasn't much more than backup in case a fight went wrong or just to secure the castle. He seemed quite nice but a little drunk on the outside, one of the kind that did his job out of duty instead of the one for fame, power, or satisfying their sadistic needs. And only about a quarter of all knights stationed here could say that about themselves. The man was unmarried but engaged and would commit this summer, so Dew gave him his kindest regards. Sadly, he had to leave at the end of his shift, and the next guard wasn't all that talkative. Not that Dew tried to strike up yet another conversation. When he woke up, it was shortly before noon. Avery didn't visit again. The bright light fell playfully into his cell. Barely a cloud could be seen, but apparently some flowers bloomed nearby because he smelled the particular kind of sweetness only those could emit. He laid his hand on his right pocket to feel for the knife. It had a smooth hilt through the sturdy leather being wrapped around it tightly. He asked himself if Avery expected him to kill, and if so, when. He knew he could, but didn't want to. And if he ran away, where could he stay? He didn't have money on his person as they did when they traveled around together, and it wasn't the time of the year where the forest could provide enough already for a spoiled once a merling, now a human brat like him. As the afternoon came, he got his scarce meal. His last one here, no matter if he would die, would be freed or free himself. He ate, leaned back at the wall, and dozed off to end up in a feverish dreamscape, watching Charles' corpse dangle from one side of the prison wall to the other. Then he was shaken awake, and he immediately opened his eyes, hoping to see Avery lifting him up to his feet and telling him that he was now a free man and should go back to the kitchen and help, because they still were lacking servants, because Josephine fell sick again, or was still sick, and Sean was also still infected and couldn't move. But it was the man he had talked to, and an unfamiliar face in armor. His arms were chained together before he could shake off the tiredness. Dew cursed himself in silence. They left through a gate on the castle side, out of the sight of the common people. No one of the two knights said a word as they went on with Dew in their middle. He looked down so he wouldn't trip over on the rocky path downhill where the city and the marketplace and the Gibbet were. The sun was shining warmly, and he didn't need a cape or a jacket or a warm wing around his shoulders. Generally, he wouldn't need that anymore. He couldn't reach the damn knife, and Avery had failed and was probably having a mental breakdown by now. Again. The same person being the cause as the first time, where the dragon hybrid had been laying on the ground, clawing at his face and horns, shaking, trembling, and tears streaming down his bleeding face. They left the forest. The path was now horizontal, and Dew saw the walls around the city not too far before him. There was a meadow on the left and on the right. In the distance he could see some of the trees of the graveyard. Would someone order him a gravestone? Probably not. The area wouldn't exist long enough before a raging fire of pink would burn everything to ashes. Or not. Who could know? "Hey man, I'm sorry for this, but order's order, and I can't do much about that," the engaged man said apologetically. So at least someone in the area thought he didn't deserve to die. He wanted to reply that it's fine, but it really wasn't. He couldn't even struggle himself free if he tried, or knock them out, because they wore helmets and he didn't. They wore plates across their chests, arms and legs, and he wore simple cloth over his thin complexion. So he said nothing in return. The man sighed melancholically, and the other one probably rolled his eyes. Dirt hit his eyes as he was stopped abruptly when something big hit the ground before them like a cannonball, creating a small cloud. Dew blinked and wanted to use his hand to wipe his vision clear, but couldn't. Water filled and cleared his eyes, finally enabling him to see. Only 1 meter away from him stood a winged man with a scroll in his shaking gauntlet. "Here," he exclaimed, "from the king." The unfamiliar man let go of Dew's arm, took the scroll, investigated, and broke the wax seal, and read the content. As he was done, he gave the scroll to the other one, who let go of Dew's arm as well. The prisoner stood limply, unsure of what the piece of paper contained. When the scroll was rolled up again and given back to Avery, the first one said smilingly, "It's your lucky day, I guess. Enjoy your day." And then he turned to the other guard to ask him out for a drink, and they went on and left Dew standing on the road after taking off the chains. He watched Avery as he clumsily put the scroll into his belt. Then he took a sudden step towards Dew and held him in a tight embrace. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the Merling's ear, while Dew was still trying to comprehend what happened, and that Avery was now genuinely hugging him, not bars in between them or any verdict which could tear them apart. "I'm sorry," he repeated, his voice losing more and more power while the pitch went up. "I couldn't reach His Majesty during the morning, and the guard said that he had an important meeting, and then there were some letters, and then it was night. Then nobody knew where he was, and there were visitors, and after all that I still didn't have an official allowance, so I just stormed into his office and—" His voice cracked, and he didn't speak for a second. Then he continued, "You weren't in the cell when I came, and I failed to reappear correctly, so I just fell." Dew patted his shoulder. "I'm alive and didn't have to kill anyone." Avery laughed dryly. "You failed at that from the beginning. Even you can't get out of shackles without at least breaking a joint or two." Slowly their embrace loosened, but Avery kept Dew's hands in his own and looked at him from a short distance. "You look a little disheveled. You didn't sleep last night, did you?" Dew asked as they began to walk back, while the setting sun drenched everything in its warm golden light. "Not a second," he whispered. "How did Josephine react when you talked to her?" "I think I scared her half to death. A small chuckle escaped Dew. It was exactly as he had imagined. Then he looked down at the scroll and had to know, "What's on that scroll? And how did you convince the king to let me free?" "It basically says that all charges against you are dropped and that you have immunity when it comes to execution for the rest of the time you spend here. As for the last question, I just said you don't want His Majesty to perish because of me, and that you also don't have the possibilities to have acquired poison this fatal. But in return for that big of a favor and for my rude entrance," Avery avoided his gaze, and their hands lost themselves. "I gave him another year. Now, you don't have to stay, only I do, and that's fine," the hybrid quickly went on. "A whole year," Dew exclaimed. There was a knot in his chest. Avery desperately had wanted to be gone by 18 because he hated everything he had to do. Now not even that plan would work out. "It's okay, I'll just stay here for the time, and you can find a nice place to live in Haven or something. You will love it there. I've been at the coast once, and it looks great with all the water, and the people are sympathetic and—" Dew interrupted automatically. "I don't want to leave you here." But wasn't that exactly what he wanted to do at some point in time? If he couldn't part now, it would be even harder in the future. "We could meet up eventually after I am done here, but I don't want you to be here." Dew stopped and looked up at the other person, who had apparently realized what he had just said, and corrected himself. "I don't want you to be in a kingdom where you can lose a limb simply for stealing an apple from a decorative table, and where the inhabitants are violently revolting against their ruler. I don't want you to live through that anymore." Dew looked behind him to the city. It was a beautiful view, with the small clouds far in the distance being shone upon from below, and the tiny red roofs of the houses, and the meadow and the forest beginning right next to him. He sat down in the new grass, and Avery soon followed. He thought about the presented possibilities. Living a year in Haven, where it was safer than here, while Avery continued to walk at the castle without a clue about Dew. "I am willing to take the risk and stay," he then said decisively. Avery sighed. Maybe it was worry, disappointment, or relief. Who knew? Then the hybrid leaned his head onto Dew's shoulder, and his smooth horn gently pressed against his neck. Dew suddenly became aware of his own heat. "I love and hate you for that, you know," Avery stated. "Me too," Dew thought. "So how was your time at the mansion?" "Complicated," was the simple answer as he slipped off Dew's shoulder and landed in his lap instead. He was dozing off already. Dew weakly smiled after a moment of getting used to the new gesture, put one of his hands on the horns, and moved the black hair out of the other one's face. Avery had his eyes shut and laid there motionlessly. He was clearly already halfway into the world of sleep, and he deserved it. He just sold another year of his life to a man who didn't appreciate all of the thoughts and tears given to him. Dew now tended to rather like the person Avery religiously addressed by His Majesty, as if he deserved it. And he didn't. He didn't deserve to live inside this poor hybrid's head. But still he did, and that forever.